What is going on, Chess YouTube? So for today's video, we are having a look at the unbelievable game played between Gukesh D, the new world champion, and Magnus Carlsen, the greatest chess player of all time, from the 2022 Speed Chess Championships. This may be a blitz game, but it was unbelievable. Let's dive right in. All right, in the game, Gukesh is playing as what? He opens 1e4, and Magnus in this game, he does go 1c5 to Sicilian defense. All right, from here, we have knight f3, then knight to c6, and now here on move 3, most white players do go bishop b5, the good old-fashioned Rossolimo, instead of the open Sicilian, and that is what Gukesh does in the game. So, bishop b5 on the board, pressuring that knight on c6, threatening even bishop takes c6, and how does the GOAT, Magnus Carlsen, one respond? Well, of course, Magnus plays literally everything in this position. These are some of his main lines, and even went h5 once against the former world champion Ding Liren, but in this game, he does go e6, and this is one of the main moves here, and according to Stockfish, it's actually the best move Black can make. The idea behind this, Black wants to go knight to e7, bolstering the other knight on c6, and then go a6, driving back that bishop on b5. Maybe it trades, maybe it doesn't, and from there you can go d5, gaining space in the center, and Black's going to have a very good game, assuming he gets all of this in unfazed. But unfortunately for him, it is White's turn to move, and here Gukesh, he decides, you know what, we're going to knock off that pony on c6 immediately. Bishop takes c6 played in the game, and now Black has the very uncomfortable choice. Do you take back with the b pawn or the d pawn? Well, it turns out d takes c6 would be an absolute disaster. This is not a good pawn structure for Black at all. Instead, b takes c6 played in the game, recapturing towards the center. Magnus Carlsen, he knows his classical chess principles here. And now Black, he's got the very awkward pawns in the center here. That is a very strange pawn formation. His main idea here may include going d5, gaining space in the center, and he will have very good central control. But meanwhile, White is going to have a lot of play against those doubled pawns on the c file, and that will give White good chances for an opening advantage here. All right, Gukesh, he continues d3, gaining space in the center of the board, bolstering all his pawns on light squares. He traded off his light squared bishop for that pony on c6, and then he gets everything on light squares. Man, Gotham Chess would be very proud of Gukesh so far in this game. He is also a big fan of that light squared strategy. All right, now here, Magnus Carlsen, knight to e7 is the move, developing his knight, and now White has a lot of different ideas in this position. For example, going b2 to b3, knight d2, e5, and h4. All of these are very, very playable in this position, and in the game, Gukesh does go knight d2, a very solid choice. The point being, the knight is better placed on d2 than on c3. From d2, it can go to, for example, c4, b3, maybe even e4 after e5 is played. All these squares would be very good for that pony. All right, now here, Magnus, he is tired of Gukesh and his games. He breaks in the center with the move d5. Now, the problem with this move, it is a little bit premature. Instead here, most Black players will play the moves queen to c7 or d6, intending a very fast e5, but with that pawn going to d5 in one go, it is much harder for Black to go e5 in the future, as that would hang that pawn to the pony on f3. Therefore, this move d5 is almost never played in this position, but Magnus here, he says, you know what, I am literally Magnus Carlsen. I can do literally whatever I want in this game. But is that true? I don't know. Gukesh, he's going to have something to say about it. And even though he wasn't the world champion way back in 2022, as this game shows, he was playing world champion caliber chess even back then. All right, now here in this position, how should Gukesh continue? The computer loves the idea of b2 to b3, intending bishop b2, fianchettoing that bishop on b2, exerting pressure on that long diagonal. But instead here, he goes for my favorite move on the chessboard. If you watched any of my videos, you know exactly what is coming right now, right here. He goes for the alpha zero attack with the move h4. Here we go. This is how you know it's going to be an exciting chess game. The point is that pawn is threatening to go to h5, maybe even h6, and that will activate the rook on h1 and give Black all kinds of problems on the king side to deal with. That is especially true if Black goes for the Ben Feingold counterattack, starting with the move f6 and tending a fast e5 break. And you know what? Magnus says, let's go. f6 is the move. Ben Feingold is likely losing his mind right now if he's watching this video. So Ben Feingold, cover your eyes. The Ben Feingold counterattack is in play. He's going f6. He's going e5. He does not care about the alpha zero attack with h5 and h6. I guess when you're literally Magnus Carlsen, you can do pretty much whatever you want at the chessboard. All right, Gukesh, he is not phased. He says, you know what? Two can play that game. We're going h5. We are pushing that alpha zero pawn down the board. It doesn't matter how many Ben Feingold counterattacks you play. I'm going h5. I'm going h6. We are getting the attack rolling. All right, now Magnus, e5 is the move, gaining space in the center. Now he has this tremendous pawn structure in the center, in the spear of the same-ish variation of the Nimzo Indian defense from White's perspective. It's almost as if Black is playing as White and he's playing a Nimzo Indian defense. It's very, very strange chess, but this is what we have right here. That is just modern chess free these days. All right, Gukesh, he does not castle. He does not develop his queenside. Instead, queen to e2 is played, bolstering his light squares on e4 and maybe even intending moves like c4 coming up. Very interesting. All right, Magnus, how will he deal with this? Well, his priority right now is bolstering his insane pawn structure in the center of the board. He goes bishop to e6, bolstering d5, a perfectly fine move. Hard to argue with that. But Gukesh, he is ready. Now here, Gukesh has a diabolical move right here in this position that would just set the board on fire. If you like puzzles, pause the video right now and try to find the insane move by the new world champion, Gukesh D, that would set the board on fire against Magnus. And while you're at it, go and smash that YouTube like button. Thank you so much for doing that. It really does help me out a ton. I do appreciate that. All right, now the key move here for White, I do want to point it out. This was not played in the game, but this move is so freaking good. I have to show it. It is the move b4, gaining space on the queen side. Now, the point being, if Black takes the pawn with c takes b4, you say, you know what? d4, we blow open the center. You get the pawn square in the middle of the board where everything is attacking everything else. That would be very, very good for White, as Black's king on e8 would be so vulnerable. But instead, in this position, b4 was not played. Instead, c4 was played. And here, Gukesh, he gets that crazy light square pawn formation in the center of the board. The point being, if Black takes on either c4 or on e4, then White recaptures with the pawn. For example, if d takes, then d takes, and Black's pawn structure is ruined, and the exact same thing happens if he takes on e4. D takes, then d takes, and again, Black gets those horrible double pawns on the c file. Therefore, both these recaptures are just unthinkable. You can't do it, and therefore Gukesh has the incredible blockade on those light squares for now. That means his two ponies on f3 and d2 are just dominating those two bishops on e6 and f8. This is just tremendous for Gukesh so far in this game. So what is Magnus going to do about it? Well, as they say, at the elite level, when in doubt, you push those alpha 0 a pawns and h pawns down the board, and a5 was played by the GOAT. He does whatever he wants. His threat now is a4, maybe even a3, and Gukesh says that alpha 0 pawn is too dangerous to be left alone. He must go a4 himself, blocking that pawn. The alpha 0 pawns are touching. How cute. And what will Magnus do now in this position? He says, you know what? It is time to activate that rook. Rook to b8, pressuring the weak pawn on b2 is the greatest chess player of all time. Now that bishop is going nowhere. Not that it was going anywhere anyway. It is currently blockaded on the c1 square. Gukesh will have to do something about that. Now here, the computer gives many different moves for Gukesh. For example, these are just some of the moves White can play here. Rook to a3, knight to g1, knight f1, even rook b1, defending b2 in advance. Rook a3 may be the strongest move, intending rook b3, challenging the rook on b8. But instead, Gukesh plays the first serious weakness of this game, the first serious mistake, that is. He plays the move b3. Now, this move looks very logical. It's very thematic. I mean, after all, what could be better than getting literally every single one of your pawns except f2 on those light squares? Again, Gotham Chess would approve of this light squared strategy. However, the problem with this move is that pawn on b3 is very, very weak, and the rook on b8 has a lot of pressure on it. And again, now the idea of rook a3 to b3 is no longer possible, as you cannot have two pieces on one square. All right, now here, Magnus, he continues. Knight to c8, very good move, opening up the path for that dark squared bishop on f8 to enter the game. However, there were some stronger alternatives. Here, both bishop g4 and d4 are favored by my good friend Stockfish. So if you're wondering what is the best way to play this position, d4 and bishop g4 come to mind. Instead, though, knight c8 played in the game, a typical Magnus Carlsen move, retreating his pieces back to the back rank. And get a load of this. Magnus Carlsen, he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces. Okay, 5 if you don't count the king, but 5 pieces on the back rank. Magnus Carlsen, who do you think you are? Literally Magnus Carlsen? He's the only guy who could do that and get away with it in the game. All right, now here, Gukesh, how does he want to proceed? Well, it turns out the strongest move, I mean, if you have even like a basic understanding of chess, you would know. When in doubt, you push the alpha 0 h-pawn. h6 is the key move here for white, but instead, bishop to a3 played in the game, pressuring that weak pawn on c5. However, the problem is this bishop on f8 more than defends it. And what is white going to do? Is he going to go queen to e3, pressuring the pawn? Then black goes d4, and he's just fine. So Gukesh, bishop a3, what is the idea of this move? What are you thinking? Quite frankly, I don't know. If you know the reasoning behind this move, comment down below, enlighten me, give me a tip. What's the idea here? I can't figure it out. All right, now here, Gukesh, the strongest move here, or sorry, Magnus, the strongest move for black here, for Magnus, is going to be d4 right now in this position, closing down the center and not even giving white the option of going queen d3, as then you would lose the queen. Instead here, bishop d6 played in the game, a decent move, a decent square for the bishop, and of course that was part of the idea of knight c8 played earlier in the game, freeing up this diagonal for the bishop to enter the game. And now look at these two b's on d6 and e6. They do a terrific job of controlling all these central squares, and overall, Magnus is slowly but surely fighting back in this game. All right, Gukesh, how does he want to proceed? Well, the right way to proceed here, as white, is to just blow open the center immediately, and white has a beautiful way to do that. Again, if you like, pause the video right now. Try to find the beautiful way to open up the center. Here, the key idea as white. This did not happen in the game, but the key idea, you take on d5, c takes d5. Of course, you must recapture with the pawn, as if you take with the bishop, then you lose that bishop on d5. So, c takes d5 is the response, and then white goes d4, achieving the, I mean, it's not even a pawn square, it's more than a pawn square. Everything is just attacking everything else way too much. I can't even draw arrows, there's too many things going on here. So that would be the key idea, but instead, in this position, instead of c takes d5, then c takes, then d4, here white plays yet another slightly dubious move, and that is the move rook to c1. Now, this move is reminiscent of the Nimzo Indian defense from black's perspective, especially the same-ish variation with the move 4a3. The point being, you are piling up pressure on that weak pawn on c5. The threat now is c takes d5, then c takes, then bishop takes, as then the attack of the rook on c5 is opened up. You can win that pawn clean, but here, Magnus Carlsen, he spots this, nothing gets by this guy, and he just goes d4, bolstering his pawn on d4 and locking down the center forever. Get a load of this. There is no more option of c takes d5, as the pawn isn't even on that square, and that means the rook on c1 is just biting on granite. It is doing nothing, and white's light squared pawn strategy just isn't doing that much for him in this position. And meanwhile, black, with all those dark squared pawns, he seems to have the space advantage and is doing just fine. All right, now with the center closed here, the focus of this game will switch to the king side, as there's literally nothing either side can do in the center or on the queen side. Therefore, again, these king side files is where the action will be happening. All right, here, white continues, rook to c2. What is the idea behind this move? Honestly, it's a little bit strange. Instead of rook c2, the right idea was king to d1, intending king c2 with the artificial castling of the king. From there, the rook can go to, say, g1. You can threaten, I don't know, g4, g5, and so on, and white could get a big initiative going on the king side. Instead, again, rook c2 played in the game, and this rook here is just completely misplaced. All right, now Magnus, knight b6, getting more and more of his pieces off the back rank, a good idea and a good correction from where, on move, 12, he had almost all his pieces still on the back rank. All right, now here, Gukesh, he shows the idea of rook c2 played earlier in the game. Again, king d1 may be the strongest move, intending perhaps king c1, king b2, and so on, but instead, bishop c1 played. So this was the idea, after all, of rook c2. Here, Gukesh wanted to go rook c2 and then bishop c1, dropping the bishop behind the rook, where it can get reactivated on this diagonal, but overall, that plan does look to be maybe a little bit slow. And here, Magnus will have plenty of time to do whatever he wants in this position. And here, whatever he wants means artificially castling his king over to the queen side with the move king d7. What a move by the GOAT. The point being, the king is going to c7, where it is perfectly placed, and it's going to be literally impossible for white to ever attack that king. So, Magnus, he knows the king side is opening up. Therefore, you skedaddle your king over to the queen side, where you will be doing just fine. All right, now here, Gukesh D, the future world champion, knight f1, intending knight g3, maybe knight f5, maybe h6. He's got to get something going on the king side, and beyond that, you do open up the scope of the bishop on this diagonal. So good multi-purpose move. And here, for reasons that are beyond me, the computer says the best move in this position for black is knight to c8, redeveloping or undeveloping the knight back to the back rank. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. Instead, he goes for a completely different idea, but similar, knight to a8. Magnus says, you know what? My pieces belong on the back rank. I just can't keep them activated for too long. He goes back to a8. I guess the knight is going to c7, where it is decently active, but Magnus playing, again, moves that just confuse me to no end. All right, Gukesh, rook b2 is the move. Defending the pawn on b3, the rook on b8 still pressures it. Therefore, that is a very important move to make. And with the knight no longer on b6, that means the rook is legitimately pressuring b3. Therefore, again, you do need to defend it. All right, knight c7 played by the GOAT. The point being the knight, again, is decently placed on c7. Maybe it wants to go to, I don't know, e8, e6 in the future, and so on. Now we have knight g3, developing the knight on the king side, a decent move. And now black does go g6, finally challenging white's alpha 0 pawn on the king side. Now, very importantly, alpha 0, it was a very big fan of pushing the alpha 0 pawn all the way to h6 in most positions. But here, if white does that, that would be a critical mistake. If you go h6, you lock down the h file and you give black free rein to go for an f5 break, and black would be absolutely dominating. There would be no way to get counterplay against that. Therefore, you cannot do that. But interestingly enough, in this position, once again, the computer says king d1, intending king c2, maybe even king b1 is the right way forward, getting the king to safety before doing anything else. But of course, Gukesh, he's a very aggressive attacking player. He has no time for that. Knight h4 is the move, developing the knight and pressuring that weak pawn on g6. What is black going to do about it? He drops his bishop back. Bishop f7, very good move by the GOAT, defending g6 from that pony on h4. Now here, Gukesh, he flies out with the queen to g4. g4, always an active square for the queen, and on here it does pressure the king on d7, and the king must move. So in the game, well, actually the king doesn't move. It can't go to c8 again, as the queen controls that. That is the square it would want to go. So instead, knight to e6 played, the pony blocking the check on the king from the queen. All right, now we have knight to e2, dropping back with the knight is Gukesh D. Very solid move. Now king to c7. Finally, the king completes its journey. It is very well placed on c7. There's no need to go further. And here, once again, king d1 is the right move for Gukesh. You simply have to get that king, the high tail, out of there. But once again, Gukesh, he ignores that possibility, and he goes for a very dubious idea. He expands on the king side with the king's gambit style move f4. Now, don't get me wrong. I love a good f4 in chess, but here it just doesn't work because Magnus Carlsen, he came prepared, he came ready, he spots the best response instantly, and he blitzes it out. And again, if you like puzzles, pause the video right now and try to find the best idea for Magnus Carlsen right here as black. It's a beautiful tactical shot. It is the move f5. Here we go, the pawn square on the board, these pawns all attacking each other relentlessly. What is the idea behind f5 here for black? It's very, very simple. No matter what you do, you are in trouble. Here, for example, if you take on e5, you lose the queen on g4. Instead, if you take on f5, black will recapture not on f5, but on h5. Once again, hitting the queen with the pawn, and that pawn will be defended by the bishop. And that is what happens. E takes f5, then g takes h5, and now get a load of this. That born again alpha 0 h pawn, it's born again. It started its journey on g7, but now it's born again as the alpha 0 pawn, and it pressures the queen on g4. The queen's got to move. In the game, queen to f3. Gukesh sliding his queen back. Now knight takes f4, jumping in with the pony. The ponies get traded off the board. Knight takes, e takes, then bishop takes. And here you may think bishop takes f4 is the logical move, getting rid of that bishop. But no, the move here for the GOAT is rook to e8, hitting the king on e1 with tempo, a brilliant move. Now we have king to f2, a move that Magnus Carlsen himself is a huge fan on move 2. He just loves going f3, then f2 in the opening, but here it occurs on move 28 instead of move 2, and it turns out f2 is the best square for the king right now. If it goes to say d1 or d2, that could block out the rook on b2. Therefore, f2 controls the e-file and has the rook coming to d2 if it needs it. All right, here in this position, Magnus Carlsen, he should not be in a rush at all. He's got a perfectly fine game, and the right move here for the GOAT is just to be patient. Rook g8, maybe intending, I don't know, queen e7, rook e8, and so on, and you have a perfectly fine game. But instead, the GOAT, he goes off the deep end. He loses all his marbles all in one go. I don't know what happened to this guy. Something happened. Someone dropped him on his head. I'm kidding, but seriously, he plays a move right here that is just a complete shocker, and not in a good way. He plays the move rook to e3. The exchange sacrifice, the rook sacrifice, whatever you want to call it. He gives up the rook voluntarily for the bishop, and he hits the queen in the process. Now, if you don't take the rook, black can go, for example, queen e7, consolidating and getting an excellent game. Therefore, here, you must take the rook right away. That is what's played in the game by Gukesh. Bishop takes e3, d takes e3, queen takes e3, and then queen to f6. The queen with the triple attack on the rook on b2, the pawn on f5, and the knight on h4. Of course, the attack on the rook is the deadliest. The rook is more important than that pawn or that pony. And beyond that, the rook, of course, is hanging. Therefore, you do need to move the rook. So, rook e2 played in the game, doubling up the queen and the rook on the e-file. A very solid choice. Now here, Magnus, how does he want to play this? It turns out rook to e8 is the right move, but that is very passive, and it gets some more pieces off the board. Instead, Magnus, he continues down with the aggression, even if it means making mistakes over the board. He goes rook takes b3, flying down, winning that pawn on b3. The audacity. Gukesh D, he knows his days are numbered. Bishop takes c4 is being threatened, as if you take back on c4, you lose the queen. Therefore, he gets the queen out of that danger immediately. Queen to e4 played in the game, bolstering the knight, bolstering f5, bolstering c4, sort of in a way. And now what will Magnus do? He goes queen to g5, activating the queen on the g-file, threatening very dangerous ideas, including bishop to g3 with the fork on the king and the knight. What will Gukesh do about it? He goes for the rook lift, rook to h3. You just gotta love a good rook lift on the third rank. The rook now being activated horizontally instead of just vertically. All right, now here, Magnus, what will he do in response? He's got to find a good square for that queen. Of course, knight f3 could be driving back that queen any moment now. Therefore, in the game, queen g4 played, offering the queen trade. Magnus, he's not going back to g7. He's not going back anywhere else. What is he doing? Queen g4, offering the queen trade, and the eval bar skyrockets in favor of Gukesh. Magnus choking under time pressure. All right, now Gukesh, he doesn't trade on g4. He doesn't allow H takes g4 ideas, taking that born-again alpha 0 pawn and converting it back to the original g pawn. Instead, he goes for the move knight to f3, retreating the knight and allowing Magnus to trade on e4 if he wants to. And that is what happens in the game. Unfortunately, he does that. Instead, queen g7, once again, is the right choice, both from a theoretical standpoint and a practical one. His only chance here is to keep those queens on the board, but the GOAT, he trades the queens. Queen takes e4, giving up those queens. Now here, Gukesh, all he has to do is rook takes e4, and he is going to be doing tremendous. But instead, for some reason, he goes d takes e4, and the problem with this, it gives up the pawn on c4. If you don't do that, if you go rook takes e3, everything is basically defended. Yes, you can win the pawn on d3, but the rook on the third rank is doing a good job of defending, and overall, you are just fine. But instead, d takes e4 chosen in the game. Now, bishop bishop takes c4, harassing the rook. The rook has to move. Where is the rook going to go? Well, it turns out the counter rook sacrifice is the right way forward here. You do that with the move e5. The point being, if you take on e2, then you take on d6 and then on e2, as of course that pawn on d6 would hit the king with check. So e5 here is the right move. You gain a tempo on the bishop and the pawns start marching down the board. Instead, in the game, rook d2 chosen, Gukesh missing the chance to fight for the initiative, and here he's going to pay a big price. Now we have bishop f4. Both those bishops harassing the rook. The rook has nowhere to go. What's it gonna do? The right square for the rook now is rook d1, but unfortunately Gukesh, once again, he continues down this slippery slope of making inaccurate moves. He goes rook c2, the idea being you want to pressure the bishop on c4, but this is not the right way forward, and here black's gonna have all kinds of ideas. For example, bishop e3 followed by bishop d3 is tremendously strong. Instead, in the game, Magnus, he goes bishop d3 first, pressuring both the rook on c2 as well as that pawn on e4. So it makes a lot of sense in principle, but here, white is going to have the idea of knight to d2, and from there, the bishop on c2 is essentially pinned as if you trade on c2. For example, knight d2, the best move. If you trade on c2, then you can take on b3 with the knight and you maintain the material advantage and win the game. Unfortunately, that wasn't played in the game by Gukesh. Instead, rook takes c5 played, and this is the beginning of Gukesh D's problems in the endgame. Here, Magnus, he's a shark in water. He smells his opponent is in trouble. He goes rook b2, sliding down with the rook, hitting the king on f2, and where is that king going to go? In the game, king to e1 chosen, but this is not the right move. Instead, you have to block, believe it or not, with rook c2 or knight d2. Instead, king to e1 chosen in the game, and this hastens the demise, as you can see by the eval bar, showing mate in 3 moves. If you like puzzles, pause the video right now and try to find the mate in 3 moves in this position. This is just unbelievable chess. The key idea right here, of course, is rook to b1. If the king moves, the only square is f2, then you go rook f1, checkmate. And the only way to delay the inevitable after rook b1 is rook c1, then rook takes c1, king to f2, rook to f1 would be checkmate. Now, unfortunately, in time pressure, Magnus Carlsen, he doesn't find that. Instead, in the game, he goes for a different idea, rook to e2, driving the king. The king goes to d1. Then we have rook to a2, sliding over with the rook once again. And now here, again, white can go knight d2 to try and prolong the game, but unfortunately, that wasn't played in the game. The benefit of knight d2 is you open up the attack of the rook on the bishop on d3, but instead king to e1 chosen in the game, and now the problem is bishop to e3. Look at this, Magnus cutting off every single retreat square, threatening rook a1, threatening checkmate in 1 move. What is Gukesh going to do? He goes knight d2, trying to block some of the attacks, but here, Magnus, he's relentless. He just goes rook to a1 with the attack on the king, and get a load of this. The king cannot go anywhere. The only thing you can do is block the check with rook c1. Let's play it out. Rook c1 blocks the check. Then you take on c1, and as you can see by that little symbol right there, this would be checkmate. So, with checkmate in literally 1 move left in this position, Gukesh D is forced to resign to the GOAT of chess, Magnus Carlsen. Wow, what a game between Gukesh, the new world champion, and Magnus Carlsen, the greatest chess player of all time from the 2022 Speed Chess Championships. This one was just unbelievable. I mean, wow, what a game. Starting with the weird opening, the weird pawn structure. I mean, everything was crazy up until here. And then, of course, the Alpha Zero attack with the move h4, lighting the board on fire. You gotta love it. What a game between these 2 chess titans. So comment down below what you thought of this game. I'm doing my best to make the videos a little more entertaining recently. So hopefully you guys enjoy that with the, the highlighted squares, the arrows, the jokes. I'm doing my best to make it a little more lively for you guys. So comment down below if you enjoyed that, if you want to see more of that style. I think I'll be doing that more in the future. So stay tuned tuned for that. And yeah, if you can, smash that like button for me. It helps me out a ton. It really does. It really does help the video get out to seen by more people. So I appreciate if you're doing that. And if you want to see more Gukesh versus Magnus Carlsen action, you can check out this video right here where I cover yet another one of their very best games. So check out that video and I'll see you in the next video.